When my dad's face flashed up on the giant projector screen at his own retirement gala, begging me not to play the next slide, I just smiled, took a breath, and clicked next. Yeah, I know. That sounds brutal. I promise there's context. By the way, hey, I'm Leah. Well, technically, it's Rosalind Leah. But my dad only ever used Rosalind the way some people say tax audit or plumbing issue. You know, like the word itself was an inconvenience. And before I walk you into that ballroom with me, with the champagne glasses and fake smiles and $300 centerpieces, we've got to back up. Because none of what I did that night happened in a vacuum. It was 20-something years of being invisible, 20-something years of being the easy child, the independent one, the built-in scapegoat, so my older sister, Madison, could stay polished and perfect. If you've grown up as the responsible one, while your sibling got to be the star, you already know the script. Madison was 3 years older than me, and from the moment she popped out, the universe apparently decided we were doing the favorite and the afterthought. Madison was the kind of kid my mom called sparkly. Blonde curls, big blue eyes, loud laugh, always dancing in the living room in some tutu. People would stop my parents in the grocery store and say, "Oh my God, she's gorgeous. Is she in pageants?" And my mom would just glow. And then there was me. Dark hair, quiet, the kid in the corner with a book. I wasn't ugly or anything. I just didn't perform, didn't twirl, didn't know how to flirt with a room at 5 years old. One of my earliest memories is sitting on the bottom step of the staircase, hugging my stuffed rabbit so tight the fur rubbed off, listening to my parents fuss over Madison's costume for her dance recital. Mom was kneeling on the floor, pinning sequins back on. "Hold still, baby. You're going to be the prettiest one on stage." Dad was standing behind her, camcorder already out, practicing angles. "My superstar," he said, kissing Madison's head. And I remember opening my mouth and saying in this tiny voice, "Daddy, will you come to my science fair next week?" He didn't even look at me. "We'll see, Rosalind. It's a busy quarter." I was 8. I won first place at that science fair, by the way. I built this whole ridiculous model about erosion with sand and a shoebox and a garden hose. The judges loved it. I still have the little blue ribbon in a box somewhere. My parents did not see it. Literally. They didn't show up. Mom texted me at 10 p.m. after I was already in bed. "Sorry, honey. We lost track of time." "How'd it go?" I texted back. It was fine. That was the moment, looking back, where the pattern sort of clicked into place. Madison got applause. I got, "It was fine. Don't get me wrong. They weren't monsters. I wasn't locked in a cupboard. We had food. We had Netflix. But emotional neglect, that subtle, chronic downgrading of your existence, it's like carbon monoxide. You don't realize it's killing you until you're halfway gone. Things only got more obvious in middle school. Madison made the cheer squad. Dad bought her custom shoes, warm-ups, paid for every camp. My mom drove her an hour each way to practice 4 times a week, sat in the bleachers, cheered at every game. They had this whole ritual. Post-game milkshakes, decorating her locker, the works. I did the math team. You can imagine the vibe difference, right? Our regional competition was this huge deal for me. I'd studied for months. On the morning of, I remember standing in the doorway in my too big polo with the school logo on it, clutching my folder. "Dad, can you drop me off?" I asked. "The bus leaves from school at 7 and..." He didn't even let me finish. "I've got a board meeting at 8, he said, tying his tie like he was in a commercial for corporate regret. "Ask your coach for a ride, or take the city bus like you always do. You're independent." Independent. That word became the family euphemism for, "We're not going to show up." I went. Of course I went. I took the freezing bus in the dark, my breath fogging up the window, ate a stale granola bar for breakfast, and took home first place again. The principal announced it over the loudspeaker the next day. People clapped in the lunchroom. At home, Madison was crying at the kitchen table because she'd messed up a stunt at practice and was terrified the coach was going to move her to the back row. Dad hugged her. "Sweetheart, I'll talk to your coach myself if I have to. You belong in front." He turned to me for half a second. "You had some math thing, right? How'd that go?" I just shrugged and poured myself cereal. It was fine. By high school, it was fine, was my entire personality. Madison got a car on her 17th birthday, a shiny white SUV with a bow on top. The whole dealership Instagram moment. There's a framed photo in our hallway back home of Mom and Dad kissing her cheeks while she squeals. On my 17th birthday, I woke up to a post-it on the fridge. "Happy birthday, kiddo. Left you $20 for pizza. Love, Mom and Dad." They were out of town at one of Madison's cheer competitions. And the wildest part? I didn't even question it by then. I just microwaved a leftover slice and did my physics homework. Here's the thing people don't tell you. If you neglect a quiet kid long enough, they get really, really good at disappearing. I got good at staying late at the library, signing up for every shift at my part-time job, crawling into books and code and numbers where no one had expectations of me. I also got good at watching. Like the night Madison crashed that SUV 2 months after she got it. She'd been Snapchatting and rear-ended a parked car. No one was hurt, thank God. But I remember standing on the front porch, watching the tow truck drag that poor mangled Lexus up onto the flatbed. Madison was hysterical. Mom had her wrapped in a blanket. "You could have died," she kept saying over and over. "We'll get this sorted. Cars can be replaced." Dad was on the phone with the insurance company talking about rentals. The whole thing was this big, dramatic family event. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone was involved. 2 years before, when I cracked my phone screen and paid for the repair out of my own pocket from my grocery store job, no one even noticed. Fast forward to senior year. This is where money really came into it. My dad's an accountant, not a small one at some chain tax place. He's a partner at a mid-sized firm in Spokane. He loves talking about financial planning and fiscal responsibility, and all those phrases that make normal people fall asleep. You'd think the accountant would have a plan for his kids' college, right? Kind of. Madison always knew she was going out of state, like it was a birthright. She ended up at this private college in California with palm trees and a beach and, frankly, ridiculous tuition. From the time she was 15, my parents talked about her college fund. Family friends would say, "Oh, that place is expensive," and Dad would puff up and say, "We've been saving for years." When it came to me, the story changed. "We'll do what we can, but you're so smart. You'll get scholarships," he'd say, ruffling my hair like I was their gifted golden retriever. "We believe in you, Roslyn." You know when someone says, "We believe in you," but what they mean is, "We're not actually going to help." Yeah, that. I did my part. I took all AP classes, got a 4.0, worked evenings and weekends stocking shelves at Target, studied for the SAT like it was the Olympics. I applied to a mix of schools, some in-state, one dream out of state, and the University of Washington in Seattle, which felt like this wild, sparkly fantasy city compared to Spokane. The day the UW acceptance email came, I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom surrounded by laundry. I clicked it, saw, "Congratulations," and burst into this weird half-laugh, half-sob. I ran downstairs, holding my laptop. Mom was on the phone. Dad was answering emails. Madison was scrolling Instagram. "I got in," I said, breathless. "To Seattle, to a W. Full acceptance. They even gave me a partial scholarship." Madison glanced up long enough to say, "Oh, cool. Isn't it always raining there?" Dad read the email over my shoulder, nodded once, and said, "Good job, kiddo. See, we knew you'd pull it off." I waited. There was this beat where, in every movie ever, the parents would pop champagne and say, "We're so proud. Let's figure out the finances." Instead, my dad cleared his throat. "So, tuition after your scholarship is still, let's see." He did quick mental math, his face tightening. "About 12 grand a year, plus housing and books. Well, you'll need to take out some loans and work. But you're used to working. You've always been so independent." "What about?" I swallowed. "What about my college fund?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Your mom and I had a rough couple of years after the recession. And Madison's tuition." He stopped himself, like he realized he was saying the quiet part out loud. "We did what we could." Translation: they spent my college fund on Californian palm trees and Greek life, and I was on my own. I can still feel that hot flush up my neck, that mix of humiliation and fury and this weird detached, of course. Of course that's how this goes. I nodded. "Okay." Mom finally looked up from whatever Facebook argument she was in. "You'll manage," she said in this airy voice. "You're our little problem solver." So I solved the problem. I moved to Seattle with 2 suitcases, a cracked laptop, and $500 I'd saved from my Target job. I signed loan papers with hands that literally shook. I cried in the bathroom stall after my financial aid meeting because the numbers on that screen felt like a prison sentence. And then I went to work. I'm not going to sugarcoat that part. Those first 2 years were brutal. I worked the 4 a.m. shift at a bakery, smelling like sourdough and burnt espresso, while I fumbled through coding lectures half awake. I picked up shifts at the campus IT help desk, resetting passwords for angry professors who yelled at me like I personally invented Outlook. I did freelance bug fixing for sketchy startups at 2 a.m. for $40 a pop. I fell asleep on buses, on library couches, once on a bench next to a fountain, until a campus security guard nudged my foot and said, "Hey kid, you can't sleep here." My parents called occasionally, mostly to talk about Madison. "How's our California girl?" I'd ask, forcing cheer while I stood in line at the campus food court, counting quarters for instant ramen. "She's thriving," Mom would gush. "She's vice president of her sorority. Can you believe it? And her friends are all just so classy. We're flying down for parent weekend again. Her school really knows how to treat families." Once, junior year, I was literally standing in the rain waiting for a bus because my umbrella broke and my bank account was at $3.46. I was shivering, soaked, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Dad rant about some Professor Madison didn't connect with, giving her a B. "Your sister's just more sensitive," he said. "She needs advocacy. She's not like you." "No," I said, water dripping off my eyelashes. "She's not. You'd think, with how little they apparently thought of my life, that I'd just stop calling, right? Go no contact at 19? Peace out? Good luck with your pageant queen?" It wasn't that simple. When you grow up starved of approval, you'll chew on crumbs. A 3-minute call where my dad said proud once in passing could keep me going for weeks. It's twisted, but if you know, you know. The turning point came the summer before my senior year. My partial scholarship turned into a full-ride merit award. Some donor liked the research I was doing. It covered my final year completely. For the first time, I could breathe. I quit the bakery and took a paid internship at a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. Actual salary, actual office, no name tag. The first morning I stepped out of the elevator onto the 12th floor, and saw my name printed on this stupid little cardboard sign on my desk, I had to pretend to cough because I was tearing up over a piece of cardboard. That internship turned into a job offer halfway through my senior year. Good offer, like benefits and stock options and a salary my freshman year self would have thought was a typo. I remember sitting on my sad little thrift store couch in my off-campus studio, the city lights flickering outside, holding that offer letter and just laughing, this slightly hysterical, disbelieving laugh. And then I picked up my phone. I got as far as, "Hey Siri, call Dad," before something in me froze. What would happen if I told them right now? There'd be praise, sure, for like 5 minutes. And then, wow, now you can finally help out around here. Maybe you can pay Madison's loans. She's so stressed. Don't forget where you came from, Roslyn. I could hear it all without even dialing. I set the phone down. Instead, I screenshotted the offer letter, printed it at the campus lab, and slipped it into the back of a notebook. And I made this quiet, almost petty little decision. I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Not until I knew if they were capable of loving me just as me, not as a walking paycheck, not as a backup plan, not as the independent child who made their lives easier. Call it an experiment, or self-protection, or long-con revenge. Honestly, at the time, it felt mostly like survival. I graduated on a gray, drizzly day, typical for Seattle. I walked across that stage in a damp gown that smelled like mildew, and other people's BO, shook the dean's hand, and clutched the diploma like it was solid gold. My parents didn't come. To be fair, if we're being fair, they had a conflict. Madison was hosting a senior send-off brunch at some vineyard for her friend group that weekend. And as Mom texted me, "We already put down a deposit, honey, you understand, right?" I sent back, "It's fine." Then I went back to my little apartment, set my wet cap on the counter, peeled off my heels, and sobbed on the bathroom floor until my eyes were swollen. 2 days later, I put on a blazer from Goodwill, rode the bus downtown, walked into my new company, and started my life for real. You know that scene in movies where someone stands in a high-rise looking down at the city and there's dramatic music? It kind of felt like that, except instead of violins, it was my manager asking if I wanted a standing desk and me freaking out because they were offering health insurance and free snacks. That first year, everything changed. I went from scraping by to actually living. I upgraded from my shoebox apartment to a 1-bedroom in Capitol Hill with actual sunlight. I bought a couch that didn't smell weird. I went to Trader Joe's and put food in my cart without opening my banking app every 2 minutes. I also met Ethan. Of course I met Ethan at a hackathon. I know, the nerd cliché writes itself. He'd spilled cold brew all over his keyboard, swore under his breath with this soft Canadian lilt, and I handed him my spare microfiber cloth because yes, I am fully that person who carries one. He was tall, dark hair, glasses, easy smile. We ended up on the same team. Ate cold pizza on the floor at 3 a.m. while we argued about data structures. And when he asked for my number after we lost, I said yes without overthinking it, which for me is saying something. On our third date, sitting on the grass at Gasworks Park as the sun went down over Lake Union, he asked, "You don't talk about your family much. Are they okay?" And I heard myself laugh, sharp and humorless. "They're a lot," I said. He didn't push, just waited. So I told him, not everything at once, but enough. The math competitions, the birthday post-it, the college fund, the graduation they skipped for a brunch with mimosas and Instagram photos. Ethan listened, brow furrowed, jaw tight. "That's messed up," he said quietly. "You know that, right? I mean, it's just how they are," I said automatically. He shook his head. "No, that's how they chose to be. To you. There's a difference. And that line lodged itself somewhere deep. We moved in together, a year later, into a slightly bigger apartment with a tiny balcony and a view of the Space Needle peeking between buildings if you leaned just right. It was the first place that really felt like mine, ours. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents stayed stuck in amber. They still thought I was in grad school, trying to figure it out. I never explicitly lied. I just let their assumptions sit there. When they asked how I was doing, I'd say, busy, lots of projects, which was true. When they asked about money, I'd say, I'm managing, also true. Every phone call was 80% about Madison. She and Brandon are talking about buying a boat. Mom would gush. He's doing so well in finance, and her event planning business is just taking off. You should see her Instagram. She's really built something. How's work, Dad? I'd ask. The firm's good. I'm thinking of retiring in a couple of years. Maybe sell my shares. Travel with your mom. Madison wants to throw a huge party for me when the time comes. She's such a generous soul. And then, inevitably, how's school, Roslyn? It's fine, I'd say. I'm fine. Years go by fast when you're finally not in survival mode. Before I knew it, I'd been at my company almost 4 years. I'd worked my way up from entry-level dev to leading a small team. My title had the word senior in it. My salary had gone from, oh my God, to holy crap, with each raise and bonus. I'd paid off every last cent of my student loans. I had savings, investments. I helped Ethan with a down payment on a used car when his gave up the ghost. We took an actual holiday to Vancouver and stayed in an Airbnb that had heated floors, which I'm still not over. Through all of this, my parents never asked a single follow-up question about my life. No. What exactly are you studying now? No. What are you interested in? Definitely no. What do you want? The only time my phone lit up with Dad or Mom was when there was some crisis orbiting Madison. She lost a client and wanted advice on building her brand. I apparently was good with computers, so I could hop on Zoom and fix it. She and Brandon were stressed about wedding vendors. Could I research photographers who were cheap but not cheap? She wanted a website. Could I just throw something together for her for free? Because we're family, and you know I'd do the same for you. Lies, by the way. Absolute lies. I drew little boundaries where I could. I'm really busy with work. I can't design a whole site. That kind of thing. But I still said yes to stupid little tech favors, more than I should have, because the second I said no, the guilt campaign started. Wow, you've changed. You used to be so helpful. Family sacrifices for each other. Speaking of sacrifices, the call that set everything in motion came on a boring Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk in our open plan office in Seattle, headphones on, tapping through code reviews, when my phone buzzed with Dad Mobile. I stared at it for a second. His calls were rare enough that my stomach still did that old, unpleasant flip. I slid my headphones down. Hey, Dad. Roslyn. He sounded chipper. That fake chipper he used when he was angling for something. Got a minute? Sure, I said cautiously. You remember how I've been talking about retiring? Yeah. Well, it's official. I'm stepping down at the end of the year. The partners are throwing a big retirement gala at the country club. Black tie, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be the event of the decade. I could practically hear him puffing up through the phone. That's nice, I said. And, he barreled on, Madison's going to plan the whole thing. You know she's got that event business now, right? I bit back a comment about how I only knew what I saw on Instagram. Uh-huh. So this is a huge opportunity for her. Lots of potential clients, wealthy people. You know, we want everything to be perfect. And She had the most brilliant idea. "Here it comes. We're going to do a big slideshow of my life," he said. "Baby pictures, college, early days at the firm, that kind of thing." And she said, "Dad, Leah is so good with computers. She could totally put this together." I closed my eyes, counted to 3. "You want me to make your slideshow?" "Exactly." He sounded relieved, like I'd just solved his biggest problem. "You can handle all that tech stuff so much better than your mother and I. We'll just send you the photos. Maybe some video clips, too. We were thinking music? Maybe that song from our wedding? And if you could make it like really professional looking, we want to impress people." "Is there a budget for this?" I asked. He laughed. "Oh, come on, Rosalind. It's just pictures. It'll take you what, an hour? 5 minutes of me standing there, utterly silent, compressing 2 decades of unpaid emotional and actual labor into that pause. And of course," he added, in that offhand way he had when saying something enormous, "we need you to be there. Family-only table near the front. Madison says she might have you say a few words. About what a great dad I am." My throat actually closed for a second. "I have work," I said. "Seattle's not exactly around the corner." "It's one weekend," he snapped, patience evaporating. "We helped you with school. The least you can do is show up and make your old man look good." There it was. There it always was. "We did the bare minimum. Now pay us back with interest." "What's the date?" I asked, scribbling it down, already knowing I'd go, even as part of me screamed. He told me, "Oh, and make sure you bring something appropriate to wear. This isn't one of your college parties." We hung up with him feeling victorious, and me staring at my monitor, fingers numb. "Hey!" Ethan's head popped over the half wall of my cubicle. "You look like you just watched a horror movie." "Close," I said. "My dad's retirement party." We got pho that night at our spot down the street, steam fogging the window as I told him what Dad wanted. So, free multimedia production plus emotional tribute on a deadline with a gilt garnish, Ethan said, stirring his noodles. "Classic." "I mean, it's not a huge ask," I said automatically, and then stopped. "Wow, listen to me minimizing." He raised an eyebrow. "Do you even want to do it?" "No," I admitted. "But if I say no, I'm the ungrateful daughter who can't even show up one weekend." "What if you did it?" he said slowly. "But on your terms." My brain did this little spark. "Go," I said. "Well, they clearly still have you filed under helpless student in their mental Rolodex," he said. "What would happen if the people at that party saw you as you actually are? If your parents had to see you through other people's eyes? That's harsh," I said. "Is it?" He tilted his head. "You've been protecting their comfort for years. Where's yours in this picture?" That night, lying awake staring at the ceiling while Ethan snored softly next to me, the idea really sank its claws in. Because here's the twist. My dad's firm had just signed a major contract with my company. We were building them a custom internal platform. Guess who the lead on that project was? Hi. I'd sat across from my dad's managing partner in a sleek conference room in Seattle, laptop open, talking timelines and scope during a kickoff meeting. He'd shaken my hand, saying, "We're so glad to have you on this, Leah. Your reputation precedes you." I didn't tell him my last name then. Our client portal used my hyphenated name, my mom's maiden name, and my first name, long story involving a sexist HR system. But there'd been no reason to connect me to Frank Dawson from Spokane. Suddenly, it felt like fate had handed me a loaded slide deck and a microphone. Over the next few weeks, 2 parallel projects took shape. By day, I led my team. Stand-ups, JIRA tickets, architecture diagrams. late-night bug hunts. Our platform for Dawson & Co. was going to be solid. I took a certain petty delight in writing clean, efficient code for a firm that had nickeled and dimed my childhood. By night, I dug through the Dropbox folder my mom shared, labeled Dad Retirement Less Than 3. Hundreds of photos. Madison's christening. Madison's first day of kindergarten. Madison on Dad's shoulders. At Disneyland. Madison at prom. Madison in her sorority letters. Madison and Brandon at some winery. Some grainy shots of Dad fishing, men's retreats, golf tournaments. There were a handful of me. Me as a baby in a hospital blanket. Mom looking more tired than happy. Me at maybe 5, half hidden at the edge of a birthday party frosting on my chin. Madison front and center. One picture of me at a science fair, holding a ribbon, expression neutral. In one of them, I wasn't even tagged in the file name. It just said Madison_1 0F_Bayday_others.jpg. Others. That was my entire childhood in one word. I built the slideshow. I did. I chose the most flattering pictures of Dad. The fishing trip where he genuinely looked relaxed. The early firm days where he and his partners sat on milk crates because they couldn't afford chairs yet. Him and Mom in the 90s with terrible hair dancing in the kitchen. I also made a second version, same opening, same music, but woven in between the images of Madison on award stages and my dad shaking hands with important clients, I dropped in a few other things. A screenshot of my loan balance the day I signed for my first semester. The happy birthday kiddo, $20 for pizza, post-it, which I'd found tucked in a high school yearbook. A photo a coworker took of me on launch day at my company, standing in front of the screen with our product live, the whole team behind me, and at the end, an email from my dad, sent to me senior year of college. Subject line, Madison's emergency. I'd been working a 12-hour shift at the bakery when it came in. Madison had overdrafted her account again. She needed $600 by midnight to pay a security deposit on an apartment with her best friend, or she'd lose it. I'd replied, Dad, I literally have $43 until payday. He'd written back, use your credit card. This is important. Your sister needs you. You're better with money. Be a team player. Family comes first. I had kept that email. Reading it now, with a cushy marketing budget and a 401k, my stomach still flipped. I dropped a screenshot of that email at the end of the alt slideshow. Then, because I'm not stupid, I password protected that version and saved it separately. I told myself I was just venting. Just processing. I wouldn't actually show it. I mean, what kind of villain origin story would that be? Then, Madison called. It was about 3 weeks before the gala. I was on my lunch break, sitting on a bench outside my office with a salad I didn't really want. When her name popped up, "Hey," I answered. "Lee." Her voice was sugary, stretched out. That tone she only used when she wanted something. How's my favorite little sis? I actually looked around, like she might be talking to someone else. "Ah, hey, Madison." "So," she drawled. "Dad says you're doing the slideshow." "Thank you. Do you know how slammed I am? 2 weddings this month, plus the gala, plus Brandon's parents visiting. It's like insane." "Yep, I've got it handled," I said. "Perfect. We'll do a run-through when you get here. Oh, and can you wear something elegant but not attention-grabbing? This is Dad's night, you know." I almost laughed. Trust me, I'm not going to outshine anyone. She barreled on. Speaking of Dad's night, we had the cutest idea. After the speeches, we want to do like a family tribute moment. Me And you. Maybe Mom if she can keep it together. Talking about how much Dad did for us. Sacrificed, just really making him feel appreciated. I felt my jaw clench. Madison, I'm not. And, she cut in, that brings me to the only slightly awkward part. There it was. The firm's covering most of the gala, she said hurriedly, but there are some extras we really wanted to add that aren't in the budget, like a live jazz trio, an espresso bar, an ice sculpture. I actually choked on my lettuce. An ice sculpture? It's classy, she said. Anyway, Brandon and I put in a bunch already, and Mom and Dad are tapped out with the house renovations, so we thought it would be really sweet if you contributed. To show Dad how grateful you are, kind of like repaying him for all the tuition and stuff. I was quiet for a full beat. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it through the phone. You want me, I said slowly, to pay for an ice sculpture, to say thank you for the tuition they didn't actually pay. She laughed. That high, fake sound. Oh my God, you're so literal. It doesn't have to be the ice sculpture specifically. We totaled it up, and if you could send like $4,000, that would cover the remaining vendor balances. You can put it on a card, right? You're not still broke? The irony. I had that much sitting in my savings account labeled fun travel maybe. I could have Venmo'd it in under 10 seconds and not felt more than a twinge. But the audacity. Why would you think I could afford that? I asked. Silence. Then, breezy as ever. You always land on your feet, Leah. You took those loans. You're good with money. You can just pay it off later. We're all sacrificing for this. Brandon and I put our boat fund on hold. A boat. Something in me went very, very still. And if I say no? I asked. Her voice went cold underneath the sugar. Then I guess we know who really cares about Dad, don't we? She hung up before I could respond. I sat there on that bench, salad forgotten in my lap, the noise of downtown Seattle blurring around me. Ethan found me like that 10 minutes later. Hey! He sat beside me. I saw your about to commit murder face. What happened? I told him. All of it. The phone call, the $4,000, the boat fund. By the time I got to ice sculpture, I was laughing in that hysterical way again. He listened, jaw tightening. You know what this is, right? What? This is the test. He bumped his shoulder against mine. Not for you, for them. Are they capable of showing up for you if you don't hand them exactly what they want? I thought of the alt slideshow sitting on my desktop. That last email screenshot burning a hole in the end. Okay, I said. Game on. 2 days before the gala, I took a half day off work and ducked into a coffee shop near Pike Place. I opened my laptop, pulled up both versions of the slideshow, and stared at them. The safe one, Dad the hero, Madison the golden child. Me, the occasional blurry extra. The real one. Messy, uncomfortable, undeniable. I'm not going to pretend I was some fearless, avenging angel in that moment. My palms were sweating so much I nearly dropped my latte. My therapist's voice, yes, I go now, highly recommend, was in my head saying, what outcome are you hoping for? And what outcome can you emotionally tolerate? What I wanted, deep down. For them to see me, to say, we're sorry, we were wrong. What I could tolerate? Silence, rage, guilt trips, being cut off. I'd spent enough time building a life where I wasn't dependent on them, that the worst case scenario didn't scare me like it used to. That realization was its own kind of freedom. I renamed the real slideshow Dad_final_retirement. I renamed the sanitized one backup. I saved both on a flash drive. And then I bought a dress, navy blue, simple, elegant, hit just below the knee. Not showy, but when I tried it on, I looked at myself and thought, you look like a woman who knows her worth. The gala was on a Friday night. Ethan came with me, in a charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. We drove from Seattle to Spokane after work, that familiar ache in my chest growing stronger the closer we got to my hometown. We checked into a generic hotel with beige walls and scratchy sheets. I straightened my hair in the crooked bathroom mirror, put on eyeliner with a hand that shook just a little. In the lobby, as we waited for the Uber to the country club, Ethan squeezed my hand. You don't owe them a performance, he said quietly. You owe yourself honesty. The country club was exactly as pretentious as I remembered. White pillars, manicured hedges, valets in tiny bow ties. Inside, the ballroom glowed with chandeliers, and that soft lighting that makes old money look younger. Tables draped in cream linens, floral arrangements, taller than I am. A stage at the front with a podium, a screen, and the firm's logo projected behind it. Subtle, Ethan muttered. People were already milling around, clusters of suits and cocktail dresses. I recognized some of Dad's colleagues from when I was a kid, their faces older, bellies rounder. But no, one recognized me. Until Aunt Helen. Leah. I turned, and there she was, in a deep green dress, her graying hair curled, eyes bright. Helen, my dad's older sister, the only adult in my childhood who ever really saw me. Look at you, she said, holding me back at arm's length. You're gorgeous. And you look happy. I am, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. This is Ethan. She shook his hand warmly. Thank you for taking care of my girl, she said. We chatted for a few minutes, and in that whole time, no one else from my immediate family came over. I could see them across the room near the bar, a little constellation around my dad. He looked older, grayer at the temples, deeper lines around his mouth. But his posture was the same, that straight, I am important spine he wore to work and, apparently, parties about work. Madison was, as always, impossible to miss. Floor-length silver dress, hair in big curls, perfect makeup. She was laughing, head thrown back, one perfectly manicured hand wrapped around a glass of champagne. Brandon stood next to her in a slick navy suit, smile a little tight. My mom hovered near them, in an ill-fitting purple gown that she kept tugging at, her eyes flickering around the room like she was counting status points. Eventually, Dad noticed me. Roslyn. He boomed it like we were at a barbecue, not a black tie event. Heads turned. You made it. I crossed the room, Ethan at my side. Hi, Dad. He gave me a brief, awkward one-armed hug that smelled like cologne and expensive wine. This must be, Ethan, my boyfriend supplied, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you, sir. Congratulations. Dad nodded, already half turned back to his cronies. You get that slideshow to the AV guy? He asked me. I have it on a drive, I said, holding it up. Great, he said, already scanning the crowd again. Madison, did you see? Your sister's here. Madison swanned over, air-kissing my cheek, leaving a faint trace of perfume. You look cute, she said. It sounded like, you tried. You too. I said, because I am a bigger person than I feel. She immediately launched into a monologue about vendor mishaps. The florist was late. The pianist had the wrong playlist. But don't worry, she'd fixed it all. Crisis management is, like, my superpower, she said, eyes flicking around to see who was listening. Did you get my message? She added in a lower tone, turning back to me. About the invoice, the $4,000, I said plainly. She shot me a warning look. Shh. Ethan squeezed my fingers under the table linen where we stood. I didn't send it, I said. Her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes went sharp. We'll talk later, she said. Dad wants tonight to be perfect. Of course he does, I murmured. After some mingling, people found their seats. Ethan and I were at a table with Aunt Helen and Uncle Thomas, some partners' spouses, and a junior associate who looked like he was fresh out of college and terrified to be there. My parents and Madison were at the front table, obviously flanked by the firm elite. Dinner was fine. Salmon, overcooked vegetables, the usual. There were toasts. The managing partner talked about my dad's work ethic. An old colleague told a story about pulling an all-nighter in tax season with him and some bad vending machine sandwiches. People laughed in the right places. I watched my dad soak up the adoration, eyes misting at the right moments, hand on my mom's shoulder. I watched Madison squeeze his arm, lean into the spotlight of his legacy like it was a heat lamp, and I sat there, that old familiar cold place in my chest, humming, and thought, this is the last time I pretend this is okay. Finally, the MC said, and now, we have a very special presentation put together by Frank's daughters, Madison and Leah. Madison stood up, pressing her hands together. I did most of the planning, she trilled into the microphone. But Leah is our little tech wizard, so she handled the nerd stuff. A polite ripple of laughter. I walked up to the AV table on shaky legs, handed the tech guy my flash drive. Open the file called dad_final_retirement, I said. You got it, he said, slotting it in. As I crossed the back of the room to sit again, something in me shifted. If not now, when? If not like this, how? I stopped halfway, took a breath, and instead of going back to my seat, I turned and walked toward the stage. Leah? Madison hissed from behind the head table, smile frozen. What are you doing? Just adding some context, I said calmly. The opening notes of my parents' wedding song floated through the speakers. Photos flashed onto the screen. My dad as a baby, my grandparents, his graduation, my parents' early years. People awed right on cue. I took the microphone from the MC. My hand wasn't even shaking anymore. Hi, I said. My voice echoed just slightly. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Leah, or Rosalind, if you've heard my dad yell that across a soccer field. Light laughter. I'm his younger daughter. I let that sit. I could feel all the times I'd swallowed that introduction over the years. All the tables where I'd been the extra chair. When Madison asked me to put together this slideshow, I continued, I started digging through old photos, and it hit me. There are a lot of moments in my dad's life that I wasn't around for, because I wasn't born yet, obviously. A few chuckles. But there were also a lot of moments in my life that he wasn't around for. The room quieted a notch. I saw Aunt Helen's head tilt, eyes sharpening. I'm not saying that to be dramatic, I said quickly, just to give you a different angle on the man we're celebrating tonight. On the screen, a photo of my dad with toddler Madison on his shoulders faded into one of my parents in front of the firm's original office. My dad worked hard, I said. No one's questioning that. He built something here, provided for us, put a roof over our heads. Nods, relieved looks. We're back on script. And, I added, like a lot of parents of his generation, he assumed the easy kid would raise herself. A murmur. Uncertain. My mom's shoulders tightened. There's this story in our family, I said lightly. Madison was the sensitive one. She needed more support. I was the independent one. I'd figure it out. People around the room nodded. They'd heard versions of this. The golden child and the workhorse. Everyone knows a family like that. So when college came around, I said, stepping away from the podium, closer to the edge of the stage, it played out that way. On the screen, a photo of Madison in front of her sunny California dorm appeared. My parents on either side of her, arms wide, matching school sweatshirts. My parents flew down with her, moved her into her dorm, took pictures with the mascot. I narrated. They were there for parent weekend, for homecoming, for all the big days. Click. Now, a grainy photo of a rainy campus. A dark-haired girl in a cheap parka, duffel bag over her shoulder, standing alone under a gray sky. I took a Greyhound to my campus with 50 pounds of luggage and a $500 limit on a student credit card. A ripple. Someone near the front sucked in a breath. My dad's an accountant, I said conversationally. I always thought that meant we have a plan for your education. Turns out the plan was Madison gets the fund, Leah gets a pep talk about scholarships. My dad shifted in his chair, face flushing. The managing partner glanced at him, then at me. I did get scholarships, I added quickly, because accuracy matters. I also got 3 jobs, panic attacks, and a long-term relationship with instant noodles. A few people laughed, awkwardly. Here's the thing, I said, lowering my voice just a touch. While all that was happening, my parents thought I was floundering, still a student, barely scraping by. They told relatives I was trying to find myself, while Madison made them proud. Another murmured wave. People were fully listening now. Forks paused. Conversations stilled. And I let them think that, I said, partly because I was tired, but partly because I wanted to see if they'd ever pick up the phone and ask, "So, Leah, what are you actually doing? What lights you up? Who are you, aside from Madison's sister?" I let the silence answer that. They didn't, I said. Not once. On the screen, a photo appeared that almost no one in that room had ever seen. Me, standing in front of a glass building downtown, holding a little plaque with my name on it. My coworkers behind me, smiling, balloons in the background. So, since they didn't ask, I said, heart hammering, I'll tell you. Hi, I'm Leah. I'm a senior software engineer at Nordlinks Systems in Seattle. A murmur of recognition. A couple of people actually turned to whisper to each other. Our company had been in the business news a lot lately. For the last 3 years, I continued. I've been leading a team building custom internal platforms for clients. Some of you might have heard of one of them, Dawson & Co., accounting. Every head swivels to my dad. The portal your staff is using to track billable hours, manage client documents, and file internal reports? I said pleasantly. My team built that. The junior associate at our table made this tiny, strangled noise. Aunt Helen's hand flew to her mouth. And I love my job, I said, genuine warmth creeping in. I love my coworkers. I love the life I've built in Seattle. I've paid off my loans. I have a wonderful partner. I'm not, in fact, eating ramen in a dorm somewhere, as my parents still seem to tell people. A thin, nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Now, I said, and my voice hardened just enough, you might be wondering why I'm saying all this at my dad's retirement party, instead of, say, at a family dinner like a normal person. I turned slightly, looked right at my father. His eyes were wet, angry, confused. It's because the only time my parents call me, I said clearly, is when Madison needs something. Click. The email popped up on the screen. The font was small, but the subject line was big enough. Madison's emergency. My exact reply and his exact words glowed 20 feet tall. Use your credit card. She needs you. Family comes first. A low gasp went through the ballroom, like someone had opened a window in winter. Last month, I continued, my sister called to ask if I could go into debt again to help pay for some Grekschers at this gala, an ice sculpture, a jazz trio, because, in her words, we're all sacrificing. Madison shot to her feet. "You're twisting this," she snapped. "This is not the time, Leah." "Sweetheart, sit down," Brandon murmured, tugging at her wrist, face ashen. "I am telling the truth," I said quietly. "And if not now, when? When would have been convenient for you, Madison? After I sent the money? After I smiled and said how lucky I was to have parents who sacrificed so much while I worked myself half to death to cover the tuition they didn't pay?" My voice cracked on that last part. I took a breath, steadying. "I am not saying my parents are evil," I said. "They did what they thought they had to do. They had a daughter who screamed for attention, and a daughter who quietly handled her own needs. It was easier to give everything to the squeaky wheel." A harsh little laugh escaped from Aunt Helen's table. "What I am saying," I added, "is that ease for them translated into years of therapy and self-doubt for me. It translated into me crossing this stage tonight, not as the proud daughter of a retiring partner, but as the woman who had to build a life in the shadows of someone else's spotlight." The room was deadly quiet now. Even the servers had frozen in place. I swallowed. "So, Dad, congratulations on your retirement. Genuinely, you did work hard. You built something. But I also built something with far less help. And I needed you to know that. Not because I owe you a performance of success, but because I am done letting you tell a story about me that isn't true." I set the microphone on the podium. "I made 2 versions of this slideshow," I said softly. "One where I barely existed, and one where I did. I picked the second one, for once." With that, I nodded to the AV guy to stop the slideshow on the email and walked off the stage. As I passed my parents' table, my mom reached out, fingers brushing my arm. "Leah, we can talk about this at home," she whispered, eyes shiny. "Please don't embarrass your father." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. "Mom," I said, not unkindly, "you've been embarrassing me my whole life." I kept walking. Behind me, the room erupted, not in applause, but in noise. Voices rising, chairs scraping, someone sobbing. Madison saying, "She's lying. She's always been jealous." Aunt Helen's voice, sharp as I'd ever heard it, saying, "No, Madison, she isn't." Ethan was waiting for me by the side door, already holding my coat. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I let out a breath. I felt like I'd been holding since childhood. My heart was racing. My hands were cold. And yet, under all that, there was this deep, startling calm. "I think," I said slowly, "for the first time in my life." Yeah. We slipped out into the cool night air. The stars were faint, drowned by parking lot lights. But they were there. I could still hear the muffled chaos from inside. But out here, it was just us and the hum of distant traffic. In the car, my phone started buzzing like it had grown a conscience. Mom, Dad, Madison. Over and over. I flipped it face down. Back at the hotel, I kicked off my heels and sat on the edge of the bed, adrenaline draining, leaving me shaky and strangely empty. "Did I go too far?" I asked Ethan. He sat beside me, wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You told the truth," he said. "In a room where the lie has been the only story for decades, that's not too far. That's a course correction," I cried then. Not the pretty, one tear down the cheek movie cry, big, ugly sobs that left mascara streaks on his shirt. Grief for the childhood I didn't get, rage over the unpaid bills, and missed recitals and post-it birthdays, exhaustion from carrying all of it in silence for so long. When I finally fell asleep, my phone was still buzzing on the nightstand. We drove back to Seattle the next morning. I kept my phone on Do Not Disturb the entire way. Window down, wind in my hair, that weird lightness still there under the ache. I wish I could say that. The next day, my parents showed up on my doorstep with apologies and insight and a fruit basket. They did not. What they did was send a long, furious group text. Dad, what you did last night was cruel, ungrateful, and humiliating. Mom, I can't believe you would attack your father on the night we were honoring him. Madison, OMG, therapy much? You made everything about you, as usual. Enjoy your independence. Don't come crawling back when you realize you have no family. I stared at those messages, thumb hovering. Then I opened a separate chat with Aunt Helen. Me. Hey. Sorry for the drama. Helen. Don't you dare apologize. You were brave. They needed to hear it. Call me when you're ready. I muted the family group chat. I didn't block them. Not yet. But I put a hard shell around my peace. The following weeks were strange. At work, life went on. Deadlines, sprints, coffee runs, stupid office jokes. My manager called me into her office and offered me a new title, technical lead, and a raise that made my stomach flip in the best way. At home, Ethan and I cooked dinner, binged Netflix, argued about whose turn it was to do laundry. Normal couple stuff. But there was this constant background hum of unresolved family static. Little pings from relatives. A text from my cousin Jamie. Holy crap, Leah. I saw the video. I had no idea. I'm sorry. A DM from some uncle I barely knew. You should have talked to your parents privately. That was disrespectful. I did not respond. FaceTime from Aunt Helen, where she told me over tea that my parents were in absolute meltdown mode. They're telling anyone who will listen that you blindsided them, she said, rolling her eyes, as if they haven't been blind to you for 25 years. Are they okay? I asked, because apparently my empathy reflex is still intact. They're embarrassed, she said bluntly. Their little narrative got cracked in front of their fancy friends. Your mother is mortified. Your father is oscillating between anger and, occasionally, this tiny flicker of regret when he thinks no one's looking. What about Madison? Helen snorted. Playing the victim, of course. Telling everyone she tried so hard to include you, and you threw it in her face. Some people are buying it. A lot aren't. They were in that room. They saw the email. Weeks, stretched into months. My parents kept sending occasional texts. Some angry, some weirdly mundane. Like my mom asking if I still had her lasagna recipe. I answered the neutral ones, in short sentences. I let the barbs float by untouched. I started seeing my therapist more often. We unpacked that night in the ballroom from every angle. The little girl part of me that still felt guilty. The adult part that was proud. The fear that I had burned some irrevocable bridge. The relief that maybe that bridge needed burning. You did something very important, she said. One session, tapping her pen against her notebook. You interrupted a pattern. Those are noisy moments. They generate a lot of smoke. That doesn't mean it was wrong. Ethan and I kept growing, quietly, in the middle of all that noise. One Sunday morning, barefoot in the kitchen pouring coffee, he looked at me and said, You know I want to marry you, right? Like he was commenting on the weather. I blinked. Is that a proposal? He smiled crookedly. No, that'll be better planned. This is just a fact. The actual proposal came 3 months later, after a hike in the Cascades. We were both sweaty. My hair was doing that frizzy halo thing. My boots were muddy. He pretended he'd dropped his water bottle, bent down, and when I turned around to tease him, he was holding this small velvet box with shaking hands. "Leah," he said, voice cracking. "No speeches. You're my favorite person. Life is better with you. Will you marry me?" "Reader," I ugly cried again. "Obviously." And I said yes. We celebrated with burgers and milkshakes at some diner off the highway, my ring sparkling under fluorescent lights. It was perfect. Telling my family about the engagement was a decision. Part of me wanted to just skip it, build an entirely new life with this man I loved, full of people who vibed with me, and let my parents find out on Facebook 5 years later, like some distant cousins. But another part, the part that had taken the mic that night at the gala, knew that secrecy was its own kind of prison. I didn't want to build my new life around avoiding them. I wanted to build it around my choices, so I sent a group text. "Hi, Ethan and I got engaged. We're planning something small in Seattle next year. I'll send details if/when I'm ready to invite people. Hope you're well." Within seconds, Mom, "Oh, Leah! Congratulations! Call me, please." Dad, "Congrats. We should talk." Madison, seen no reply. I did not call immediately. We gave ourselves a week to just exist in our little bubble. We told Ethan's parents, who reacted exactly how TV parents do. His mom shrieked and cried. His dad hugged me so hard my back cracked. They brought out champagne and baby photos and welcomed me to the family officially. No strings attached. It felt healing to see what that could look like. When I finally did call my parents, it was on an afternoon when I felt grounded. Coffee in hand, therapist's phrases in my back pocket. Dad picked up on the second ring. "Leah, hi. I heard your news," he said. "Congratulations." "Thanks. I'd like to see you," he blurted. "In person. Talk. Man to daughter." I almost laughed at the awkwardness of that. But I heard something under it I hadn't heard before. Not anger, something softer. We agreed to meet halfway, at a cafe in Ellensburg, this little town off the interstate, where everything smells like cows and coffee. When I walked in, my parents were already there at a corner table. My mom was fiddling with a napkin. My dad was staring out the window, jaw tight. They both looked smaller than I remembered. "Hi," I said, sliding into the chair opposite them. Up close, I could see the way stress had carved deeper lines into their faces these last months. My mom reached for my hand, then seemed to think better of it, and pulled back. "You look good," she said softly. "Seattle suits you." "Thanks." There was an awkward pause as the waitress brought menus. We ordered coffee. We barely touched. Finally, my dad cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." I blinked. He took a deep breath. "What you said at the party, it hurt. Not because it wasn't true." He held up a hand when I opened my mouth. "Let me finish." "It hurt because it was true. And because I heard it from a stage with 100 of my colleagues watching instead of in our living room. But the fact that you didn't feel like you could say it in our living room, that's on me. On us." My eyes stung. "I've been thinking a lot," he continued, voice wobbling, "about how I talk about you, how I talk to you. Or, more accurately, how I don't. And I am sorry." That's a small sentence for a big failure. I know. But it's real. My mom nodded, tears spilling over. "I'm sorry too," she said. "I let myself get wrapped up in Madison, in her dramas, her needs. It made me feel like a good mother. Meanwhile, you were over here, raising yourself, and I let you. I told myself you were fine, because the alternative was admitting I was neglecting you. And that's on me." The therapist in my head whispered, "Let the apology land. You don't have to fix it." So I sat there, letting their words sink in, feeling them settle over years of micro wounds. It didn't magically close them, but it was something. "Thank you," I said finally. My voice was small. "That's more than I expected." Mom sniffled. "After the gala, Helen gave us hell," she admitted. "She told us stories about you in middle school I'd completely forgotten. Science fairs, awards. Apparently you won something big sophomore year that we never showed up for." "The Regional Math Championship," I said automatically. "Yeah," she whispered. That. I sat on my bed and cried for an hour when she told me. Not because I felt sorry for myself, because I realized how much I'd missed. Dad rubbed a hand over his face. "We've started seeing a counselor," he said gruffly. "Together and separately. Old dogs, new tricks." Against my will, a small smile tugged at my mouth. "I'm glad," I said. "Really, not just for me. For you. We're all a bit messed up." We talked for 2 hours. Not about Madison, about me, my job, Seattle, Ethan, what I wanted for my wedding. My dad asked questions I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. My mom listened without interrupting, without pivoting back to my sister. They didn't ask about money. They didn't make a single comment about, "Now you can help your sister." It was surreal. Before we left, my mom reached across the table, hesitated, and then took my hand. "If you decide to invite us to your wedding," she said carefully, "we will come as guests, not as directors. No opinions, no demands, just proud parents in the back row. If you'll have us." I searched her face. There was fear there. Fear I'd say no. There was also something like humility. "I'm not promising anything yet," I said honestly. "I need to talk to Ethan. Think about what I need that day to feel safe. But this conversation helps." She nodded, a little disappointed, but respecting it. Progress. On the drive back to Seattle, I watched the dry hills roll by, my engagement ring catching sunlight, and felt this cautious kind of hope. Not a rom-com reconciliation. More like the first green shoot poking through after a long winter. Madison, meanwhile. "Yeah." She sent exactly one text after I announced my engagement. "Congrats. Don't be tacky and do a cash bar." I stared at it, snorted, and set my phone down. Months later, through Aunt Helen, I heard that Madison's business was struggling. A few clients had backed out after the gala craziness. Word gets around in smallish towns. She and Brandon were fighting about money. There were whispers of him wanting kids and her wanting brand deals. Part of me wanted to reach out, to say, "Hey, we're both products of the same messed up dynamic. Maybe we can unpack this together." Another part remembered her voice on the phone. "Then I guess we know who really cares about Dad." I chose, again, to protect my peace. Our wedding was small, 40 people in a cozy urban winery in Woodinville on a rainy October evening. Exposed brick, strings of lights, candles flickering in mismatched holders. I wore a simple ivory dress that I'd found on sale and loved instantly. My hair was in loose waves. No veil, no tiara, just me. Ethan cried during our vows. So did I. Aunt Helen's mascara was everywhere by the end. My parents sat in the second row, hands clasped tightly. They didn't bring up Madison once. They didn't comment on the lack of chair covers or how we served tacos instead of salmon. They just watched. After the ceremony, my dad hugged me, really hugged me, for what might have been the first time in my adult life. "I'm proud of you," he said into my hair. Not for this, for all of it. Mom held my face in her hands, eyes wet. You look happy, she whispered. That's all I ever should have wanted for you. There was still a Madison-shaped ache in the day. Her empty chair at the family table. The mental slideshow of how she might have rolled her eyes at our lack of a photo booth. But as the night went on, friends laughing, Ethan spinning me around to some 80s song, my coworkers doing shots with my cousins, that ache shrank. Because here's what hit me hard. Somewhere between cake and the last slow dance. Family isn't the people who share your last name. It's the people who show up, who listen, who adjust when they've hurt you, instead of insisting you adjust around them. I'd spent my entire childhood auditioning for a role in a family where the script was already written. Madison the star, me the stagehand. It took burning that script at a retirement gala of all places to realize I could write my own. If you're still here, listening to my ramble about leaky emotional ceilings and slide deck revenge, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like you could win a Nobel Prize and your parents would still be talking about your siblings' Instagram? Have you ever been the easy one, the one who doesn't need much? Until one day you realized that was just code for, we don't bother to show up for you. And have you ever hit that point where you thought, if I don't stand up for myself now, I'm going to disappear completely? If you have, you are so not alone. I'd actually love to hear your stories in the comments. Seriously, how did you finally draw a line? Was it a quiet boundary? Or did you, like me, accidentally turn it into a full-blown TED Talk at a family event? What happened after? Your experiences matter. Saying them out loud, or typing them to strangers on the internet, can be the first brick in building a different life. If my little retirement gala plot twist resonated with you, if you saw yourself in that independent child label, or in the way I clung to crumbs of approval for so long, please hit that like button. It helps more women who are doom scrolling at 1 a.m. thinking they're crazy or ungrateful or too sensitive stumble across stories like this and realize, oh, it's not just me. I'm not broken. The system was. And if you want more long, messy, honest stories about revenge, resilience, family dynamics, and finally choosing yourself, make sure you subscribe to Revenge Diary. We dig into all of it here. The golden children, the scapegoats, the in-laws from hell, the glow-ups no one saw coming. Share this video with that friend who always jokes about being the responsible one, but you can tell there's hurt under it. With the cousin who went no contact and everyone whispers about them, but no one asks why. With anyone who needs a little reminder that their worth was never supposed to be measured in how convenient they are to other people. Thank you for listening to mine. Remember, the family you're born into wrote the first chapter, but you get to write the rest. And sometimes, the bravest, most quietly revolutionary thing you can do is pick up the pen and say, actually, my story goes like this.